Good day, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Ensuring a Healthy and Safe Workplace During and After the COVID-19 Pandemic. This webinar is actually being taped and done for the Brandon and Westman area. And the reason that we wanted to do that was at this particular moment in time, there is an issue in that area, of course, and our hearts go out to that area in terms of making sure that we can overcome the pandemic and what's going on in that area. We wanted to pay particular attention to that area, partially for that reason and partially because we have at Protelic an office in the area that has a partial solution to help folks who are heading back to work in businesses. And we wanted to put on a webinar and talk to you about an elevated body temperature sensor that can be used to measure body temperature and whether or not allowing people, whether it's a client or staff member, back into your business, in and out of your business. So this is the webinar for that. And today we're going to focus on this Protelic solution, as I said, the elevated body temperature sensor. We wanted to focus on Brandon and the Westman area specifically, its businesses, its organizations. As you manage through this pandemic, it's obviously across the world. We're doing this call from Brandon and from Winnipeg, where Protelic is based. My name is Aaron Margulis. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Operations for Protelic. And with me today, and many of you may know him, is Pat Medill. He is one of Protelic's definitely smartest minds, best technicians, and has been with Protelic for a very long time as a leader of our Protelic branch in Brandon. And we wanted to bring him on to talk to the body temperature sensor, and also to just remind you that Protelic is in Brandon and serving the Westman area. And so you'll learn a little bit more about Pat, and you'll learn definitely about our the real reason we're here, the elevated body temperature sensor. Before we get kicked off in a real way, just some housekeeping. If you are on the call and you want to chat, please feel free to ask a question at any time. We'll get to it at that time when we see the question pop up. If not, you can hold your questions to the end, and we'll get back to you at the end of the session. So just a little bit of a word on Protelic. We've been in business now for 51 years. Our head office is based in Winnipeg, and we have two offices, branch offices in Brandon and in Calgary, Alberta. We serve all of Manitoba, and really the company has served Manitoba and all Western Canadian provinces for many years, and we are only in the commercial space. As many of you who may be listening in or click onto this webinar would have known, we had a residential business. We got out of the residential business in 2019, and we are fully 100% devoted to commercial businesses and organizations across Western Canada. We focus on two lines of business, the first being security integration, so alarms, intrusion, cameras and CCTV, door access. We also do work in the institutional world where we do PA systems and nurse call systems for schools and hospitals, correctional facilities. So we do work in big business, small business, and everything in between. And so Protelic is there to service your security needs. But we also do a business called CheckMate, which is a business designed to help staff and organizations manage those of their staff members who are working alone. And we have a large safety business called CheckMate. And CheckMate elevated body temperature sensor is what we're going to talk about today. It's kind of a mix between security and safety. And we'll talk a little bit about how it can help you as people start to gravitate back to work, even during the pandemic, and of course, once it's all over. I'm going to just introduce Pat, and Pat, maybe just in a few brief words, talk a little bit about your time in Brandon, maybe a bit of your background, and what the Brandon office has to offer for the Westman area.
Sure, thanks, Aaron. So I've been with Protelic for about, I guess, 30 years now in that area. We offer all the services that were listed there by Aaron. So we try to offer personal service right in our own community. We have office here right in our own community. Anybody can drop by anytime they want for any questions or anything like that. But everything's like home-based right in Brandon here. So.
Thanks, Pat. And today's focus is going to be on the elevated body temperature sensor. It's a tool that you can use to monitor, to inform, and also to provide reporting. And it's a great tool for folks and for companies that are in your area that are battling against COVID. But it's not only COVID, it's a tool that allows you to measure the temperature of anybody who's entering a facility, exiting a facility, however you choose to deploy it, and you can see that person's body temperature. And as we all know, it's but one symptom of COVID, but given the fact that we're in this pandemic, it's a very opportune time to take a look at this temperature sensor. So now we're going back to business. Brandon went through a period of time, I think, Pat, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you had almost 75 days during the beginning of the pandemic where there were no cases or relatively few in the Prairie Mountain region. And certainly as we tape this at the end of August and early September 2020, it's a difficult time as there have been a lot of cases identified in different clusters in the area. So that still doesn't preclude that people are headed back to work, and we have to try to figure out what the new normal is. And certainly that new normal is going to be changing on a daily basis. So it's anything but normal. But it's important that you have a back to business workplace safety plan to protect your employees and your staff and employers for sure. Anybody who's going to be going in and going out of your place of business or your organization needs to be protected. And it's incumbent on employers to make sure that they are protecting their staff members. So this temperature sensor, as we'll get into, is very important. And Pat, you may just want to address just briefly Protelic Brandon, which is sitting there at 545 Assiniboine, right in the heart of Brandon. Just a little bit about what you're doing to protect office workers at your shop.
Sure. So we're in a smaller building with about 8 employees. We have a common area where we do some work. So as soon as this all came into place, we basically segregated everybody apart. What we could do is, if we could give them their own offices, we definitely did that. If they had to work in a common area, we made sure that they were like socially distanced apart. Now that the new came in, we have masks for everybody, of course, and hand sanitizing. And we also have a body temperature sensor at our door where our employees come in. So everybody scans when they come in, and then if it's good, you come on in. If not, then we have some protocols in place of what we're going to do when that happens.
And of course, it's important, and the Brandon office, the Winnipeg office, the Calgary office of Protelic all do this. It's planning and what needs to be in that plan. So if you look down the list, it may be a little bit bureaucratic, but it's also extremely important that everybody, every business and organization has a plan. And that is shared in really these 6 steps, and I'll go through it quickly. Risk assessment. What's the risk? You need to identify what the risks are to your staff, to anybody who is entering your facility, to those that your staff may be in contact with when they step outside your facility. So you have to identify across the board for your staff and employees what those risks are. You need to have a control in place to manage for those risks. There needs to be policies and procedures that are not only written down, but once they are agreed upon at the management levels of your company, communicated, trained on, and then monitored. And of course, once they're being monitored, you have to assess how they're working, whether they're working or not, what you have to change. It needs to be a very orderly plan. It's something that, as we've gotten into working with clients on the elevated body temperature sensor, always seems to come up because it's just one piece of the puzzle in trying to make sure that workers are safe, employees are safe, and clients and customers are also safe through this pandemic. If you go to, we're going to go to the next slide here. Some of the steps Pat mentioned, until we truly have a vaccine that's available, and because there's really no one symptom that that can really say you've got COVID, there are certain things that can be done to protect. And Pat mentioned that in the Brandon office, trying to keep physical distance, frequent hand washing, disinfecting of the work area, washing your hands, masks now likely to be a part of our life for a long time to come now. And then at the bottom here, daily temperature testing of all employees. And as I said before, that's not going to identify necessarily that you have COVID-19, but it is one of the symptoms that is an indicator that you may need to be tested for it. And businesses need to figure out how to deploy something like this, where they're going to put it. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get into it. And then what they do when there's an actual positive test that someone does have an elevated temperature, and go from there. And of course, contact tracing and making sure that if somebody does have it, how do you actually gather lists, gather information so that everybody can be tested and ultimately, hopefully, be found safe. So Pat, maybe just to walk us through some of the highlights here. Why would we test for a high temperature? Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that?
Well, basically, the high temperature is one symptom of COVID-19. I mean, there's high temperature can be other things. It could be the flu. It could be a terrible cold or anything like that. But it's one of the first symptoms probably, and one of the easiest ones to test for right now for a company, because you can do it in a non-contact way. And you can do it to every employee that does come in your building. So you can catch it before it comes into your building. And with that, you can make your decisions of what to do with this employee, if they should go and get tested or go home for the day or whichever.
And the costs are pretty high. And use this example in our webinar of the Cargill plant in Alberta, where over 1,000 employees tested positive. So quite significant. Cargill is a major international company, so they were likely very capable of handling it, even though it was, catastrophic to them in that area. And we want to talk about this from a business perspective. Clearly, the most important perspective is making sure that the people who get tested and those who test positive are kept safe, and the preservation of their lives are on the line here. So there's definitely the human side of it, but of what we're here to talk about today is the business side of it, and the implications of a company like Cargill having a situation where 1,000 employees test positive is awful, but it is an international company with a lot of support and investment behind it, and it's going to be okay. But you have to look at it from the perspective of all companies, and not all companies are in the situation that Cargill is. Any loss of revenue, reduction in productivity, that affects the bottom line, and certainly ultimately could lead to the downfall or the shutdown completely of a business. And we've seen that happen. And certainly Pat, you may want to comment a little bit on what's gone on in Brandon and the Westman area. Right now, as we speak, the Maple Leaf plant is going through that. Maple Leaf is also a big company like Cargill, but when that happens in a smaller center like Brandon, that does have effect.
Yeah, for sure. So if it affects a company like Maple Leaf, we have so many people being employed by that company in Brandon. It really puts a strain on all of the workforce in Brandon. And not only the big companies, but a company even like Protelixize in Brandon, I think it's even more harmful to them because they don't have the employees to back everybody up. So if you lose a couple of employees, it can really cause a lot of stress on the company, for sure.
And maybe just talk a little bit about some of the ways that that we've seen. I mean, we've done a lot of work to study the different ways to measure a person's body temperature. And like Pat mentioned, it's one way. It's an important symptom that could identify COVID, or could identify the flu, it could identify a bad cold. But you know, companies across the world have been coming out with different ways to try to measure a person's temperature. Maybe Pat, just take us through some of those ways that that you've seen.
Sure. Well, on the screen in front of you right now, there's three thermal methods right there. The one on the left is a handheld, and you get a thermal image with a little temperature bar beside it. And then in the center screen, there's actual CCTV cameras that are thermal that you can point at a door area or whatever where people are walking in, and it'll give you a thermal image with temperatures. And there's also the small handheld that you point it at the forehead, and it takes the thermal reading of your skin temperature. Again, that's all thermal, and they all are thermal, these ones, but they all thermal, and they do it on the skin temperature just, which is an important note to make. Lots of things can affect your skin temperature, of course. There's hot and cold ambient temperatures. There's strenuous work exercise, like if you bike to work or anything like that, and you come walking in, that can cause your skin temperature to rise. Your age, your gender. If you're out in the sun for a long time, of course, it's going to change your skin temperature. And even moisture on your skin can cause a false reading on things like that. So it's important to know the distinction between taking like a skin temperature and an actual body temperature.
It's important because skin temperature, and you know, we here in Manitoba, you walk in after getting smacked over the head in -40, your skin temperature is going to be you know, very low. It's going to be cold, but that's not an accurate measurement of your body temperature. And so the importance here is, how do you measure body temperature? And in our background work, what we've found is that the best way to do that is to use some of the science that's out there that shows that you'd want to measure for the most accurate body temperature reading and not skin temperature. And there's that distinction that I think anybody who's going to be looking at the sensor that we're going to talk about in a moment needs to understand, that what this sensor does is look to the best point at which we can measure body temperature, so that we get an accurate depiction of the person who walks in who may have an elevated body temperature. So the best way to do it, and I'm not going to get too deep into the science, is to look at find a way or a device that looks at the inner canthus of the eye. And the reason that point of your body is important is that it's one part of your body that is less exposed to any environmental factors. It's very thin skin, so that you can actually get to the temperature reading underneath the skin, so you're not just measuring the top layer of your body. And it's also in an area where you have a lot of blood flow in your head and over your eyes, and it's near major arteries. So you can get a better reading off of reading the inner canthus of your eyes. And that's the type of science and technology that we wanted to bring when we were searching for a partial solution to helping out clients of ours and new clients, hopefully, with this temperature sensor. So the importance of this body temperature sensor can't be overstated. There's a bunch of things that I wanted to just touch base with you on. It gives a very precise measurement. It's very easy. It's very contactless, so you're not touching anything, and that's an important factor in some of these devices. You want to have a device that gives you good measurement, obviously, something that's fairly quick. And that's important, especially if you have a warehouse or a factory, or you have a lot of people who are moving in and out of your place of business. So it's quick. There's also the ability to, and you see it on the screen, the picture of the sensor itself. It can be connected to a door access system. So if someone has a reading that actually goes into a positive, which shows you actually could have an elevated body temperature, it won't let you into that place of business. It's contactless, as I said, so you don't actually have to touch the device, which is a benefit, so that there's, you don't have to clean it necessarily. There's no many people touching it. And then also, it's a substantial labor savings, and it enhances the safety of your employees. And I think that one thing that is kind of a softer benefit that Pat will touch on a little bit later is that it shows the company that the staff members that you care and that you're doing something that goes over and above what others may do to protect employees. So there are a lot of reasons to use it. You see the device there on the screen, and we're going to get into a demo in a moment. But Pat, maybe just on the next slide, just talk a little bit about the sensor itself and what it's going to show the user.
Sure. So as you see the picture of the sensor on the side there, there's a few components to it. There's the LED line on the side and your green halo kind of on the area where it takes the scan from. So on these systems, it forces the person to do a definite process to get the proper scan. So it kind of stops any variables that way. You have to be within so many centimeters of it to make a proper scan. It tells you, gives you an audible and a visual reading right on the unit. So you know right away either it's a pass or a possible fail. And it just can't take that temperature reading properly unless you're within those certain parameters, which parameters are brought much tighter on this unit than the cameras and the handhelds. So it kind of brings everything a little bit tighter and makes the process much quicker, of course, because everybody has to do the exact same thing every day in and out.
And the way I looked at it was, as a student driver knows, red means stop, green means go. So it's a pretty basic, pretty easy to use and understand for anybody, I think, in how they use it. So that LED bar shows you. It also, if you look closely, you'll see that you can't be wearing glasses. So that's a function of it. It wants to get right at your eyes to make those measurements, and you have to be a certain distance for it to actually work. So there's a number of features there, and we're going to get in a moment to the demonstration, but can you just maybe touch base on what the user would see when they actually use the sensor?
Yeah, so when the user walks up to the sensor, of course you have to bend over towards the sensor. It's mounted at a certain height to make everybody bend over at a certain height, basically, so you get the right angle to the unit with your eye. And when you do that, it'll give a quick sound, and your bar will start going either green, hopefully green for everybody, as far as I'm concerned, but red also. And as the bars go up, it gives a different temperature ratings. So if you're in the red, your temperature is elevated, but if you're at the top of the red, it's very elevated. So it kind of gives you that reading right away. You kind of know where you're at, and really it gives you a go or no go, basically, like Aaron had mentioned.
And what we wanted to do now is to show you actually how it works. It's actually a very cool device that you can get people moving through to take their temperature in a very quick way. We'll talk to you a little bit about some of the considerations as to where you might want to mount it, have it in your place of business. There's a certain environment that will make it work properly, which is of course what you want. But if we can take just a moment and show you a demonstration of it, it's a very interesting tool for you to use. So Allison. So that was the demonstration of the elevated body temperature sensor. And as you saw, as the people were going through that, the ability to, you had to take your glasses off. There were a couple of instances there where that took place, but you could get 10 people through there in about 40 seconds, which means you can move at a quite rapid pace. So you see how it works. It's very simple to use, and we're going to get into a little bit more about some of the details around it, but how we would actually, there's a few methods for you to deploy it. It can be used standalone, so we can pre-program it for you, send it out to you, and you can mount it yourself, and it's totally yours. We also have a number of different ways that we can also help you by connecting it to different devices in your place of business, in your organization, such as door access. Also, we can connect it up with strobe lights, buzzers, any way that could actually give you an identification of a positive reading, and then you have to maybe take an action. The part that I think that most companies are having to deal with right now is, okay, so I get a positive reading, what's my protocol for it? What do I do with that staff member? And that's something that that really leadership teams across any organization need to deal with. What's the protocol for keeping employees safe, keeping that employee who may have tested positive, you know, either just talked to or kept in some form of isolation for a very short period of time, maybe retested. So there's all the HR protocol that goes into it that needs to be discussed and understood, and a protocol. That's part of the plan that we talked about up at the beginning. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that Protelic has its own monitoring station. It's been part of our business for 50 years, so we monitor for intrusion and for alarm, and also through our CheckMate working alone app. So we can actually connect the elevated body temperature sensor to be monitored as well. So if someone comes in, they may have a positive reading, and we will hear about it immediately within 30 seconds or so at our monitoring station, and are able to connect with a contact list provided by the organization. And so we can actually monitor from a distance what has been going on with that, with the actual sensor. And we can notify you via a phone or email or both very immediately, so that action can be taken by your organization. And the next thing is that not only can we do that, and that's really in the heart of it actually functioning on a daily basis, but we have the ability to provide you with access to our our portal, that you can see the activity of those who've come and gone, or however you've deployed the sensor. You can see the usage of the sensor in a report form on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. We can send it out to you in a nice package, or you can go in 24/7 and see an actual days worth of results or hours worth of results at any time. You can connect into our client web portal and see that. So you'll see there on the top there, just as an example, it gives you the date. It shows you the event and the person's body temperature. It shows the indoor temperature and the humidity, and whether that person has actually gone over the parameters as set inside that sensor. And so there are parameters that you can that are preset, but that can also be adapted inside the sensor to the levels that you want to measure against for those coming and going and utilizing this sensor. You can also look at it from a phone, computer, a tablet that's connected to the network. It has to be connected into the network. So many places of business would have a security desk, but it might not be at the point of entry for staff members. But they have the ability, if they're connected into that network, to actually see what's going on with respect to that any person's test as they walk through. And it can be mounted for a security desk, for an example, or it can be used by someone in HR having a tablet or a phone, and they can see that activity and get a monitoring call from us if there's a positive test that's gone on. Maybe talk a little bit about the sensor in terms of the employer and some of the risks associated with the EBT sensor.
Sure. So with employees, and it's important, I think, to protect your employees, but as an employer, you want to protect your company also. So the EBT sensor is just another tool, I would say, to go forward with that. And it gives you like the strong indication to employees and customers that you are like worrying about their safety and their health. So it's a good impression to give both employees and your customers. It's good for your business. It's good for, I think, everybody's business, especially when you look at your employees, that you're offering them something extra, basically just to keep them safe at your workplace, so they're not worried about coming to work.
And then some of the considerations. So we've talked a little bit about protocol. We've talked about the sensor itself, the ways you can actually use it, but they have to be used in the right environment. So maybe just talk about some of the things that an employer needs to consider about where they're going to actually put this sensor.
Sure. So when you're using the sensor, you want it in an area that is basically room temperature from 18 to 24, humidity. Like on the screen, it says 10 to 75%. You don't want it mounted right beside an entrance door, where when you open the door, especially in our climate, the door opens and you get a rush of cold air. And you really don't want it in like an entrance area where when you open the door, you get this big blast of heat coming from your heating system to try to keep the cold air out. That will affect your temperatures in the room, which will affect temperatures of everything. So you want to kind of keep it in an area that's climate controlled, and it kind of funnels your employees also, so they have to walk by it, and there's a place where it's mounted, they're getting a good reading because of all the environmental conditions that you've put forth on it. And also that it's a place where if they do fail a reading, it's a place where you can stop your employee from getting any further into your business to affect anybody else.
And one of the things that we've seen in deploying some of these EBT sensors is that often businesses will have that door opening, they'll have a little, I guess, walk-in area, vestibule, and then there's another door to open. So you don't want it in that first spot, as Pat was saying. Otherwise, it's very exposed to the elements of what's outside, and you want it in a place that's really in a really climate-controlled environment, as Pat was saying, with nothing where it's very humid, or very dry. So those are some of the things that need to be addressed when you're actually looking to install one of these.
Mhm. Yeah, you just don't want it in an area where the extremes are going up and down quickly.
Exactly. So we're going to wrap it up, and before we open it up for questions, we just wanted to put some of the information down about our Brandon office. Pat and Lorene, and as you can see, and now there's another Medill in the Brandon office as well, their son Connor. So it's a bit of a family affair in Brandon, but you see the contacts, point of contacts. We also have our pertalicalarms.com website, so you can contact us that way as well. But to get to our office, you see the number on the line, you see the cell and email addresses, and contact them directly. I mean, they're in Brandon, they're local, and Pat, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, phone anytime. We'll definitely set up an appointment. We can also bring a demo model up for you to try. So by all means, phone us, ask for a demo on it. We can set it up and have it working at your office for a day, just so you kind of get an idea of how it works and how well it works. Absolutely take full advantage of that if you can.
Perfect. And now we'll open the chat for any questions. We don't have any questions at the moment. I'd like to thank everybody for participating, and again, consider using the CheckMate elevated body temperature sensor. And in the Brandon and Westman area, definitely contact Pat or Lorene at the Brandon office on Assiniboine Avenue. And thank you very much for your participation today. And Pat, thanks for helping us do this.
Thank you very much.